What's up, and welcome to another edition of Locked On NBA, the biggest stories with the local experts. I'm your host, Jackson Gatlin, also host of Locked On Rockets right here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Today's episode is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline has you covered this season with more props, odds, and lines than ever before. BetOnline, where the game starts. Today, we'll be chatting with Jake Madison of Locked On Pelicans as the Pelicans pick up CJ McCollum just ahead of the NBA trade deadline. What has CJ looked like in his couple games so far with the Pelicans? What does this move mean for the Pelicans and their chances in the playoffs now and in the future when they hopefully get Zion Williamson back in the rotation? But first, a quick message from our friends over at BetOnline, because football might be over for this season, but basketball is in full steam for both pro and college hoops. From all the latest odds, totals, player performance props to where the next fired coach is going to land, BetOnline.net is the number one spot for all of your sports betting needs. BetOnline remains the best spot for all of your sports scores, podcasts, and news this season. And it's not just basketball. BetOnline.net is your source for hockey, boxing, UFC odds, right to the Olympic coverage and information. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends and actions. BetOnline, where the game starts. Joining us now is host of Locked On Pelicans and also co-host of Locked On NBA Wednesdays, Jake Madison, who you can follow on Twitter at NolaJake. Now, Jake, the newest member of the New Orleans Pelicans, CJ McCollum, he's had a couple games under his belt already this past week, and we're going to get to those in a second. But first, just kind of walk me through the logic on the Pelicans side of things, acquiring and going after a guy like CJ McCollum, who doesn't exactly line up with the timelines of some of the other guys on this, younger Pelicans roster.
I think this was a move that the Pelicans looked at could benefit them on three different levels. Certainly, it helps them this season in the fight for the 10th spot, and you're seeing like an arms race for the 10th spot in the Western Conference in that play-in tournament right now. They have a bottom five offense in the league. They're one of the worst three-point shooting teams in the league, and if you have a chance to bring in a guy who's averaged over 20 points per game for the past 7 years, maybe you need to take that chance. And they also did it for a guy who has shooting off the bounce. That's not something they have here in New Orleans right now. Most of their shooters are really spot up guys, no one that can really kind of get their own shot, create for themselves outside of Brandon Ingram. So bringing in CJ McCollum, who's a 40% shooter from three, a career 30% shooter on off the dribble threes, I think that's an important thing that they wanted to try and add to the roster at a fairly cheap price. Yes, it was a first round pick, but it's got numerous protections on it. And I think New Orleans just saw an opportunity to kind of push their chips in and go get the best player available that really tried to fit them. So it helps them this season. Certainly it's going to help them next season when presumably everyone's healthy. More shooters around Zion Williamson is never going to be a bad thing. And you need more shooters that are really going to make teams pay. Teams are always going to double and triple Zion down low. So you need guys that are going to make their threes. And again, New Orleans is one of the worst shooting teams from three in the league right now. A guy that's above 40% for his career is a really important thing. But I also think on the third level, it sends a message to Zion Williamson that maybe this franchise isn't as dysfunctional as he maybe thought. And hopefully this will ease some of the tension between him and the front office saying, hey, we're trying to win. We want to get into the playoffs too. Look at what we just went and did.
With CJ, he's had a couple games under his belt now. His first outing against the Miami Heat, both games losses, unfortunately, from the Pelican side of things. Against the Miami Heat, he had 15 points, 6 of 21. And then he absolutely exploded against the San Antonio Spurs, had 36, went 15 of 24 from the floor. Jake, how has he looked in these first two games, and how is he meshing with those other guys on the floor?
I think he himself has looked good. You saw it with the 37 points on Saturday against the San Antonio Spurs. He looked a little bit like a different player, right? He was not just a shooter. He was really trying to get downhill, score at the rim, and try and create a little bit more for others. I think the Pelicans plan on using him as somewhat of a primary ball handler, not something he did in Portland. Both these games, he finished with 5 assists, so you're seeing that number tick up a little bit and kind of the ways they want to use him. And again, it's a proven score. The 37 points there on Saturday really do prove it. But there is a little bit of trying to kind of figure out the chemistry between him and Brandon Ingram. And for the start of the San Antonio game, you kind of saw it be like your turn, my turn, your turn, my turn, which isn't the way to really kind of get in a groove and to try and run kind of like a free-flowing offense, which they want to do. I think that's something that just gets worked out with time. That first game against the Miami Heat, he had been in New Orleans for less than 36 hours, probably tired, just trying to get out on the court and push it a little bit too hard, do a little bit too much. They're lucky that they have 4 more games at home right now. So this this gives them a period of time where you're going to get more practices. You don't have travel days being on the road. So I think it's advantageous that they ended up trading for him right around the trade deadline, where he could come in, get into their facility, start to get a little bit more acclimated. Certainly there's some issues with their rotations right now as they try and integrate a new high usage guard. It's just one of those things that's going to take time. We've seen it before in New Orleans when they traded for DeMarcus Cousins a couple of years ago. They lost the first couple of games that he played because you just got to kind of figure out what to do. That'll come with practice time, I think.
You know, what has been kind of the vibe in New Orleans surrounding this trade? And I want to kind of hint at what Willie Green has kind of built, the culture he's kind of cultivating there, because even after the trade was made official and announced, you had a couple Pelicans in the stands that had been traded showing up to that second of the two games back to back, the home and home against the Houston Rockets. You had players that had been traded away from this team show up to show support for their guys on the floor. And I don't know if that's ever happened before in NBA history. And it kind of, I think it is a bit of a testament to the culture and kind of the brotherhood that Willie Green is building in New Orleans.
Yeah, I've never seen anything like that before. Willie Green himself had said he'd never seen anything like that before. And David Griffin, who runs the franchise, had never seen anything like that before. It was a strange moment. And after the game, the first thing the Pelicans did after that win was go over to those guys, Josh Hart and Nickeil Alexander-Walker, give them hugs, spend some time with them, I guess say their goodbyes in a sense too. But that was immediately what they did after the win. So to look at the turnaround that Willie Green has orchestrated in terms of culture, chemistry, as you said, brotherhood, family, we could use any of those words with it, from Stan Van Gundy a year ago, where they hated playing for him. No one really wanted to be here. Everyone kind of went their separate ways at the start of the offseason. It's a huge 180 in the course of 1 year. And I think it speaks to maybe a trend you're starting to see to some degree of former players getting hired as coaches because they're able to relate to some of these guys a little bit better. And I think that's truly the biggest thing. Look, whether they make the postseason or not, you know, it's kind of been a revolving door of head coaches. First Alvin Gentry, then Stan Van Gundy, now Willie Green in 3 years. This is the guy that I think is the one that's going to lead the team for the future. And I think at least they get that right. They're starting to build a culture here. So even if they don't get into the postseason, at least you've laid the groundwork for that. But CJ McCollum's been welcomed with open arms. He seems really excited to be here. All of the other players seem really excited to be here with him. I've never seen so many players run over to help him off the court. If he gets hit and knocked down, you see four guys around him right away, all arms out trying to pick him up. They're definitely building something in terms of like culture and, as you said, brotherhood here. And it's nice to see, and the city's responding well to that. This is a team that is very easy to root for, has a lot of likable guys in Brandon Ingram, Herb Jones, even undrafted guy Jose Alvarado has been really fun to watch play. So the city's responded well to them, even if they're not the best team right now.
Jose Alvarado had one of the greatest, like, in-game, like, wired for sound moments playing against the T-Wolves, coming up the court, and D'Angelo Russell is like, can this guy shoot? And he fires back so sassy, yes, I can shoot. And then next you see a clip of him nailing a three-pointer the next frame over. I'm glad you brought up Herb Jones, because he's a name I definitely wanted to ask you about here, just because Herb Jones has had a really quality, like, you know, a sneakily good rookie campaign. And I think when we look back on this previous draft class, he's going to be one of those guys that's going to be taken a lot higher than he was originally, that high second round draft pick by the Pels. What's been the most impressive part about his game through his rookie campaign?
You know, there's two things, right? And he's the 35th overall pick in this draft, and he started 44 games this year. That's an absolutely incredible thing to be able to see. You know, first and foremost, it's his defense. He's an excellent wing defender and easily in the upper echelon of wing defenders. I don't know if he'll make an all-defensive team just being a rookie like that, but he's going to get votes for it. And he's kind of put some people on notice. You've seen a couple of crazy blocks that he's had, especially recently against the Miami Heat. 2 on corner threes. He blocked Bam Adebayo from behind. It's a guy that can kind of guard 1 through 5 at times that you've seen from him. And it's truly like an impressive to see his basketball IQ, just knowing where to be and being such a smart defender. But his offensive game, which is why he fell in the draft, one, his age, and then not really having much of a jump shot or an offensive game, has grown as the course of the year has gone on. He's shooting 36% from 3. It's not an elite number, but that's a far cry from, you know, what people thought he might be shooting. And so I think that's really grown. You're seeing him average about 10 points per game, steadily adding to it. First is more of a spot up guy, but now willing to work off ball and try and cut, get the ball on rim runs, things like that. So you've seen that just steadily progress, even if the numbers aren't flashy, but he's been a bit of a revelation for New Orleans this year.
All right, Jake, I have to ask, just give me the latest on Zion Williamson. Are we ever going to see him play basketball again? What's going on that front?
So I don't think he's going to play this year. I would call it an educated guess that I don't think we're going to see him this year. David Griffin recently gave an update on him this past week saying he's still, working out in Oregon at the Nike facility. Presumably, I think they brought him there to maybe kind of get his head on right a little bit to really help him kind of progress and maybe pull him away from the situation in New Orleans to kind of let him just focus purely on the rehab. It sounds like that's going well. I've heard he has lost a lot of weight, but I don't know if that foot's healing the way they want. So I don't think we're going to see him this year, but it sounds like things are starting to at least move in a positive direction with the way he kind of approaches the rehab, the way he kind of approaches being a professional basketball player. So I don't know. I have high hopes for next year, maybe, but we'll see. There's still an outside chance. I think he could get a couple of games in this year. And if he can, even if it's 5, putting him out there on the court, I think is only going to be a good thing.
A lot of things going on in New Orleans for this final stretch of the season, with a lot of teams gunning for those final couple play-in spots in the Western Conference. You're going to have us covered for all of that and more over at Locked On Pels. Jake, appreciate you stopping by Locked On NBA with me.
Of course. Thanks for having me on, Jackson.